Welcome. I'm Dr. Gretchen Blycker, and I'm honored to begin this journey with you. In my years of clinical practice, research, teaching, I've witnessed something profound. When we bring compassion, curiosity, and embodied awareness to our inner lives, our bodies, our energy, and our minds, we create the conditions for deep healing and authentic sexual well-being. This podcast, The Sacred Garden Mandala, is an invitation to cultivate your inner landscape with care, an invitation to explore sexuality as a source of vitality, meaning, and connection, and an invitation to walk this path together, whether you're seeking healing, awakening, renewed intimacy, or a more grounded relationship with yourself. Throughout this season, I'll be joined by my co-producer, the remarkable Dee Daniels, as well as researchers, clinicians, culture shifters, artists, and young adults who each bring unique wisdom to this shared mandala. As we begin, I invite you to take a gentle breath and softly lengthen your exhale. Sense your feet, your body, and the ground beneath you. This is the soil from which your sacred garden will grow. Thank you for being here. Let's begin.
Hi, Gretchen. Thank you for that very warm welcome. And this is an exciting journey, and I'm very thrilled to be a co-producer on this wonderful adventure that is going to be this show. I think this is a great time for us to really introduce the purpose behind the show and sort of walk through what it's all about. I'd love for you to talk a little bit about cultivating holistic sexual well-being through the sacred garden mandala, because really that's what it's about.
Yes, thank you. And again, I'm this is a journey, this is an adventure, and I am excited. And I'm excited to broaden the mandala. I love that we get to have a conversation. I'm excited that this journey and path will hopefully include a lot of people. And my plan is also to have opportunities for classes online if people are interested in practicing some of these methodologies that I'll be sharing. So I'm happy to kind of give an overview. And there's a part of me that is going diving deep into the embodied practices, even as we're talking.
Love the breath and the intentional grounding as we started, because that really is helpful to always bring us back. And one of the things that I think I'm getting the sense as we are mapping out this season for this show is how it is following the natural phases of cultivating a mandala garden. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yes. So, when I hear you ask me about the mandala garden, there are many things that are present for me. The garden of our whole selves, our body, energy, and mind, and this draws from Tibetan lineages and Sol Rigpa. My teacher, Dr. Nita Chenenstag, is a he's a Tibetan physician, and he's a remarkable healer and teacher. So I'm very grateful that at this moment in time across this earth that we have access to teachings that from lineages, unbroken lineages, for more than 1,000 years, that in some ways are this digital world and online relating, even as you and I are relating right now, that it's this. So this is made possible, and of course, as I'm saying that, I'm also aware of this moment in time as being, so tumultuous, and there's a lot of discord and pain. And my hope is also that, in some ways, maybe me and others kind of being a link in a chain, or in or we'll take the metaphor of fabric and woven thread, as a thread that, we can kind of bring, as our mind, bodies, and energies are practicing and feeling and sensing and learning, that we get to be connected with these very alive and some very ancient sacred practices, which really integrate incredibly well with some of more recent understanding of our neurology and neurobiology. I'm thinking about the polyvagal theory and some of the breath practices, and some of the research that I'm so excited to actually also bring researchers in who are on the leading edge of scanning technologies, or other ways of, reading the effects of these ancient practices. So we get to have the insight and understanding of, from these measures of what's happening, but we get to also feel in our own experience for ourselves. So this is also a journey of experimenting, and what I'm planning to be offering, I'm not asking anybody to just take without, their own inquiry, their own investigations. Yeah, so this in some way is like our own research, and our own research in investigating our inner selves. And as much as I'm excited to bring in, people whose, whose lives and careers were gifts, I'm also it's very important to me not to present a hierarchy of experts, and who are the only ones who have access to knowledge or information. And I think it's really important to be connected with our inner wisdom and our inner senses, and the inner trust. And my mind is going to all the different structures over centuries, millennia, that have maybe purposely sought to create a disconnection within some groups of people and their self and their senses, their self-worth. So this is the garden, our nature. My teacher, Dr. Nita, talks about in Buddhism, the orienting beliefs around, our inner nature is pure, which is, so it's original purity. And in that sense, and it's not in like a shame or other kind of maybe religiosity, it's really about if we think about nature as, the essence, so it's really about getting to really touch. Our essence is always here. Our purity is always here. And I am very excited to share about the ways to work with the basic elements of water and earth and fire and wind and space, and in these very practical ways, metaphorical, yes, and there are ways in which each of these elements interrelate and interface with our properties of our body, our energy, and our mind, and using these, again, metaphors that when we're practicing, they're very personal. I use this work in my clinical practice, and I've been more over the years introducing it into the teaching at the University of Rhode Island that I've been really enjoying for the last 14 years, teaching a human sexuality class in the College of Nursing. And I find that, that young adults, I mean, it's not something new, it's something, just reconnecting with, maybe for some. This is not some new novel, kind of, theory. It's life, it's vitality.
Absolutely. What's coming up for me as you talk about that, there are words that come up for me that I think are going to be so really, really prominent feelings that I think people have in listening to what's to come on this season. And that's what's really coming up for me as you say all of that. I'm feeling that there are these avenues to connect with that inner wisdom that we all have, like you say, that it's already there. And wow, I think we've got a great adventure on our hands here to be able to talk and share about all of these things from all kinds of different perspectives.
All kinds of perspectives. Yes, it's a multidimensional mandala, multicultural, and I am on a Connecticut island in Narragansett Bay, and and I do have a mandala garden. I think I heard you say the word, this transformation, and the exciting thing is that our properties are we're self-healing, we're growing, we are alive, and we can also transform. And using the metaphor of the garden with with rooting, with planting, with tending, then with the growth and the blossoming and the harvesting and the composting, and we can use those processes and metaphors, but when we take them inside, we can have access to things that and processes that we might not have, our words or language that we might have a association or meaning. But when we're working with metaphor in these processes of nature, I see time and time again with clients that think, yeah, their being lights up, when they make an association for themselves. And their connection is going to be different than what somebody else is lighting up, and what, the meaning that they're making, or the transformation that, maybe that their intentions are around, or that some of the limiting beliefs or some of the conditioning that can sometimes create lenses from which we view ourselves and the world and others that are not authentic to ourselves. So this is really a part of transformation and liberation.
Oh, I love that. Yeah, I
Yeah.
love that. I feel like, Gretchen, this is a great time for us to introduce the listeners to a little bit of background and sort of take them on a journey here with how we both got to this table, which I think is a beautiful thing. Talking about the intimate spaces reminds me of, what brings me to this table of being able to sit and produce this podcast with you is a beautiful journey for me, and working in radio for 27 years, and local radio and local community. And way back in the day when we were still playing records is when I started that process. And it was a really fun process to grow up in. And, taking that and learning the potential behind having a platform and using your voice was something that really stuck with me, obviously, to continue from radio into podcasting. And it's such a fabulous medium to be able to have this intimate relationship with someone where you can talk to people. As you know, most people, as we listen to a podcast, we generally listen to it in our AirPods, by ourselves while we're doing, whatever we might be doing to go throughout our day and our lives. And so it is a very one-on-one type of relationship. It's a very intimate format. And it's such a powerful format to be able to really build relationships, build connection, build, trust. And I think that it goes so hand in hand with what you're doing. And so I'm really excited that we get the chance to work with you on this. In talking about our backgrounds, I'd love for you to talk a little bit about yours. If you don't know from our discussion already, Gretchen is a clinical sexologist, university professor, researcher, and so many other things, and now a podcaster. Gretchen, would you talk a little bit about your background and how your journey has led you again to this moment as we share this conversation?
Thank you. Yes, I'd love to share. And in some ways, my journey, if you maybe looked at I don't know, my CV and my education, and I've had a lot of different trainings. And for me, in some ways, my intuition has been laser focused and driven to, in some ways, get to where I really am privileged. I really feel like this is interesting intellectual work, heart work, compassionate work as a therapist. And regarding this specific path of promoting sexual well-being, this journey, When I had graduated from high school the summer before, University of um, New Hampshire, I had an internship at a battered women's shelter. So women and their children having a safe place, to land, to be, to heal. So it was a lot of learning. And then I also wanted to understand the cycle sometimes that we are in, and all the factors, all the sociocultural factors, all they are, even at the time, maybe I didn't understand like our nervous systems and trauma. And then when I was at UNH for my freshman year, I chose to do the training to be an advocate for their sexual harassment and rape prevention program. And so that was that was in 1992 in the fall. So UNH was really on leaders in having these programs for supporting and for education for students about preventing sexual harm, and also for training students to be peer advocates. And we carried a beeper, and we didn't have cell phones back in that day. But so and then honestly, really learning and wanting to know for other people and for myself. I had experienced sexual trauma. And so, in my learning, like trying to get information about, how to support healing. And in my intro to psych class, we were learning about things that for me, they didn't resonate. It's like these weren't the helpful pieces that seemed like they would be transformative and healing and empowering. So I did some research about massage therapy school because it seemed like the body was missing. I mean, even as I guess it was, 18, 19-year-old, it seemed like there was a really missing very important components of healing, particularly from sexual trauma. So I went to Seattle massage school, had incredible instructors. So I left UNH. So I guess that's what I mean by it might look like I'm jumping from here to there, but I was jumping and leaping in very intentional ways. So I went to many different places as an undergrad and was married at 21 to my high school boyfriend, sweetheart. We had two sons together. He was going through medical school and I in residency, and I was then continuing my journey, graduate degree for holistic counseling. But sexual health wasn't necessarily part of that graduate program either. And so I did more training and had mentors and worked at a Center for Sexual Health. So really profoundly, one of the advanced graduate trainings I did was in Hakomi, and one of my mentors who was teaching in the program, Tessa Pybus, was Buddhist. And so she brought in, there was something about her teachings and her way of being, and I did some therapeutic work with her that I can't describe it. It like connected and awakened and clarified so much for me. And Tessa's sister was married to Chogyam Trungpa Rinpoche, and so a lot of like profound teachings. And Tessa sadly died so I was with her for a few years, and then I found myself without a mentor or without, so kind of kind of feeling like I was walking alone on this path. And then some of the things that I pursued in my clinical and professional life was then integrating these wisdom traditions and then the embodied contemplative practices with my massage background and the Western clinical background. And although my graduate training was holistic. So yes, and then I was not as interested somehow when I was in my graduate training program in working with addiction, and yet somehow that is the very thing that I ended up focusing and specializing with, both with working with people who had experienced sexual trauma and also compulsive sexual behaviors and problematic pornography use. And that also is, to me, a very sacred territory to be with people and to be able to support people and working in areas of our sexuality and emotions and inner selves in ways that maybe we don't typically talk about in everyday chit chat, or with other people, or even people who are with really close, intimate relationships. So that's a little bit of a synopsis.
I know you're going to dive into some of these topics that you brought up in a much deeper conversation in future episodes, which I'm really, really, really looking forward to. But I have a couple of questions that just come up for me as we're talking about your background. I'm curious what you think about how trauma really affects our well-being, obviously overall, but as we talk about our sexual well-being, how trauma is that line there is so prominent for so many people. And I guess I'm sort of hearing a lot of your background probably resonate with people as we talk about it. And maybe some people saying, oh, I experienced that too. And I would like to connect these things in a healthier way. And how can I? And so I know, again, these will be topics that you'll do a deep dive on. But just curious your take on that as that's coming up.
Yes, yeah, thank you. And one of the first things that is arising as I'm hearing your inquiry is about our parasympathetic nervous system is the state when we are feeling safe and at ease and relaxed, and we can, we're open, and using the polyvagal theory, the ventral vagal. So it's the rest, and the I imagine that people might have heard that parasympathetic associated with rest and digest, and why that digestion? Because when we feel at ease and we're feeling safe, we can metabolize in our food, but also our emotion. We're open to feel, and we're not guarded. And interestingly, the vagus nerve is the 10th cranial nerve, and it bypasses our spinal cord, and then it also innervates and connects with our digestive system, but also our sexual anatomy. I think that's fascinating. There's a direct connection to our safety and to our sexuality and to our arousal. And the vagus nerve is also 80% taking in information from our surroundings and outside, and people's facial expressions and their body posture. It's this information gathering, it's part of our superpowers of, sensing. Even, we can use our sense organ, eyes, but we also have these fields of awareness. And it might seem like it's invisible, but we are sensing. We don't have language for this yet, but we are, the things that we are taking in and integrating. And so sexuality. So that state is the doorway, the pathway into sensuality. And then the sympathetic nervous system is also, the mobilizing, and in states of safety, that's mobilizing for play, for fun, for movement, and in sexual context, for then arousal, but relaxation before the arousal. I can also share some about the genital sexual anatomy, and that the smooth muscles around the arteries and the clitoris and penis are, when there's signals of relaxation, those smooth muscles need to be relaxed in order for blood to flow into the genital anatomy. So relaxation and then arousal. So with trauma, the magic of our sense perceptions, that 80% of we're taking in information. When we have experienced trauma, that becomes a threat detective takeover rather than a sensory melting pleasure kind of. It's threat detective. So, and that's important. That's survival. But when we're living in states where there's not safety. So maybe structures, or when the outside world isn't safe, maybe we can navigate, and then we have our personal garden of our body, mind, and energy. That is our safety. But when our body, mind, and energy and sexuality has been violated, then even our inner selves. But we're also incredibly creative at adapting. So sometimes we can, and this could be a whole other conversation, but about how creative we can get with that. but be kind of in maybe influence shaped by maybe trauma or that, threat detective, but then taking those patterns and putting them in situations maybe where the threat isn't there or whatever. So that, but so we find ways of, yeah, empowering ourselves. But sometimes post-traumatic reactivity can get in the way of pleasure, get in the way of really inhabiting our body in a whole way, in an, fully embodied heart, kind of connected way. Because sometimes our self-protection, it involves disconnecting our sexuality from our, awareness or experience. Or we know research shows that sometimes, particularly for females, either the sexual trauma can be a trigger into a trajectory of disarming boundaries, where there could then be more trauma when our senses aren't, when we're not taking in the 80% and, making conscious decisions or even intuitive decisions, when we're numb or disconnected, then more harm and trauma can possibly happen. Or if we're disconnecting and kind of quieting the whole sexual system down. Like, I don't need that. That's been, I've had really, painful experiences with that. I don't need to, I don't want to go to that territory again. I don't want the risk of that. So we shut that down. Or there's a whole lot in the middle. So learning about a lot of ways to help create safety first, so name the trauma. I'm thinking now about some of the clients I've worked with where their trauma wasn't acknowledged, not even from other people, but not even from themselves. So that creates some confusion. So sometimes it's, some of the work is even investigating because in an intake and somebody doesn't share or, that there has been trauma. And yet after a certain period in their life, a trajectory, a lot of things change. So sometimes it's going back and finding when did things start to, and then so naming what happened, and then the process of restoring, re-narrating, but also restoring our whole selves and then understanding.
And I'm looking forward to that. Before we leave your very full background, I wanted to ask you too. You mentioned raising two sons, and I think something that is such a important conversation that people are having. I think even more so today is this role of masculine and feminine. Will that be something that you touch on? I'm thinking about you raising two sons. I have a feeling that played a role in your background and in your research, and plays a role in your everyday, and masculinity and femininity. And will that be something that you touch on throughout this
Yeah.
podcast?
Yeah, absolutely. I adore my sons, obviously. They're 29 and 25 years old. And in terms of the, yeah, masculine, feminine. So what I'll be also bringing into our conversations is the wisdom from contemplative traditions and practices and Buddhism. And there's a iconography, the Yab Yum iconography in Buddhism, which looks like, the a male and female in union, and but similar like the yin yang. But this is really a metaphor. So it looks like, the sex of a male female, or even maybe we take it to the using gender as a metaphor. But really, what this is symbolizing, these are symbols of, we could say, the sacred, the enlightened masculine, or sacred enlightened feminine, or we can just kind of take the gender, because I think that language sometimes gets confusing. It doesn't get confusing, it just brings our minds to what we've already associated with those words. Wisdom and compassion. So sex and gender in the Yab Yum is really a metaphor for the masculine is a symbol of enlightened action and also fearless compassion. And the enlightened feminine is a symbol of emptiness, or the another way to describe that is the womb of potentiality and possibilities and wisdom. So the enlightened feminine is wisdom, and enlightened masculine is fearless compassion. it's fearless, so it's without fear. So it's a state of not reactivity or anger but compassion without fear. So in union, so that's what I'll be bringing in and weaving in many many different ways, and then with my my journey, my mothering journey, and being a mother of sons. My older son is, I guess, the cusp of being a millennial, the millennial, and then Gen Z is the kind of cohort that my 25-year-old is in, and so I've loved learning from my students at URI, for over 1,000 students in the last 15 years, and I've loved learning from my children. I've loved learning from my children's friends. I've really had my the intention of my household has been to be very welcoming and a place for my son was just telling me the other day, he lives in Brooklyn, my younger son lives in Brooklyn, and he and his friends were just talking about how many more like Saturday morning waffles they've had in our dining room, like no matter what, like when they were young and all this, but then even when they were older anyway. So this having a place for them to be, but also to have conversations around a lot of different things. Um, and my oldest, my 29-year-old, is engaged to be married. So that's a very exciting. This summer they're getting married in Mallorca, and she's Jordanian, and so Mallorca is a place where they have a lot of international friends, and her family obviously coming from Jordan, and he's been learning her language. So I feel like he's grown up and very emotionally intelligent. But again, I'm a biased mom, so I can't. I am acknowledging I have got plenty of biases. That's definitely one of them. When he was an infant and I gave birth in Seattle, I did training to be a doula at the Seattle Midwifery School, but I also did training to be an infant massage instructor. So my son grew up like from the very beginnings. I was already a massage therapist, but so the attunement and the massage and and I was learning a lot. I was a student along many different points in my son's life. So I brought in what I was learning, I brought in. Yeah. So he's, that learning the language of emotion, and listening to their bodies. And that's something I would always listen to your body, no matter if we're sitting and eating or we're about emotions, listening to your body. I mean, I mean, there's some things that become mantras that they'll say that, and so they're learning about people, and he's learning Arabic, so to know the native language of his partner, and so this openness and learning and a lifelong learning and growing. I guess that's also a theme.
Yeah. And oh my gosh, what great conversations these are all going to be. And that will lead us into the garden, which we're going to do next. We welcome you to the garden, the sacred garden mandala. Gretchen, you use the metaphor of a garden, and I'd love for you to explain why. Why the garden?
Yes, the garden. So yeah, on many different levels. So the garden of our body, energy, and mind, our whole selves. The mandala garden. So this is a representation of wholeness, a universal symbol, and then quite maybe the elements, getting really tuned into the elements. So the garden's a metaphor for nurturing growth and the cyclical nature of healing, planting seeds, tending to them, harvesting the fruits of self-care and transformation. And the garden can also literally be, maybe a garden that we are creating a sacred space, both always within our body, energy, and mind, and also at a place at home, like maybe with plants and then tending to, or maybe it is with something outside or a garden outside. Sometimes I invite clients to maybe be open to a quantum garden beyond space and time, and this interconnected, and in that way, or whatever resonates with people, like a magical garden or this quantum garden, where you are healed, you are whole, you are, or maybe it's before all the things happened, or whether it's trauma or challenges, or our essential nature. And we each get to bring into our gardens, so that is our sacred space, our unique space, our personal space, our magical, if you like, or quantum, if that resonates. So whatever fits for each person, to help them visualize their wholeness, their healing and flourishing, and to make some of these seemingly abstract, concepts more tangible and empowering. And so the garden has many different domains, and so the elements, and also the structure. So I'd love to maybe walk us through like the map of invited structure. But for each person is your own garden. So you garden the way the way it feels good to you. For the personal mandala garden. So in my clinical practice, we work with personal mandala gardens and relational mandala gardens, but we start with our personal mandala garden. So the proposed or suggested structure is a sacred center. So we are our inner light, or our core self, or authentic self. Again, whatever kind of words, language, feelings resonate. And then an inner ring. So around our sacred center, our inner light, there's this inner ring, and that's where our relationship with ourself, our cultivating our self-respect, our emotional health, the boundaries that we need for our protecting our inner light, or really celebrating our inner light, and self-love and healing, and maybe forgiveness of ourselves, and sometimes forgiveness could be also described as maybe taking our learning, integrating it, and then letting go of distress around things, but connecting with our wisdom. And then the outer ring of how we empower ourselves, our empowerment, our strength, our resilience, our wholeness, and celebrating our whole selves. I also use the analogies, the metaphors, really, of some Western mythology of Aphrodite and Adonis. And again, those aren't necessarily presented in the poems that I've written as, they're more metaphors for these dynamics and these energies, these universal energies. But when I was in Cyprus, I love traveling, and I'm grateful that I've been able to explore different sacred sites around different places. But when I was in Cyprus, I read about, so that in mythology, that's the story, where Aphrodite came up from the water. She would renew herself if something happened to her, so that she wasn't quite pleased about, whatever. She would just go swimming in the sea, and she was just renewed. This whole, so like nothing permanent, like nothing harmful, permanent, or it was just always this kind of renewal. And energetically, maybe so maybe that's part of a myth. But interestingly, these Tibetan practices of the ninefold purification breath practice, the other energy practices that I'm really excited to share, are in some ways are like clearing, cleansing, renewal. It's kind of in a different form than Aphrodite was mythologized to practice. So practices will be a part of this. But so our sacred center, inner ring, outer ring, and if we're open, maybe I can just ask some inquiry. I've been doing a lot of talking about things in a metaphorical way, but if we can kind of maybe drop into, so we all can maybe experiencing something potential personal inside. So for our sacred center, so first let's practice the grounding, which really means, so the earth element, so our physical body, our skeletal system that supports us, our muscular system, our skin, which is our largest sense organ. And so the element of the earth, also maybe just dropping down awareness into wherever you are, just the earth beneath you. It's just these energetic roots, just connecting with the energies, the abundant, renewing energies of the earth. And And then the element of water. So inner bodies, maybe our blood, lymph, the flow, this interconnected, this sense of wholeness, and also associated with sound, emotions, and connecting with the elements of fire, whether it's our digestive fire, or the heat, the temperature in our body. And light, it's also associated with the light, so our light of awareness, or this inner light in our sacred center. And the element of wind through our breathing, but also wind is the energy of movement. So the quality of moving our bodies, moving, and the essence of power. And space is everywhere. It's everything, and everything is interconnected. And feeling as we're breathing and being just this expanse of all the space inside. And sometimes we can help, clear space with our breathing. The inhale, bringing in this fresh breath, and then the exhale, the clearing out. Now I have a couple of questions, of inquiries, if you're open to allowing these to kind of drop inside, and without thinking about a response, just really this practicing inner listening. So what comes up on its own when you hear this question? What does your inner light feel like when you are most at peace with yourself? And sometimes when we, kind of inquire about maybe something that's, connecting or pleasurable, sometimes the opposite comes up. What gets in the way of peace. And how do you care for your body? And whether you relate with your body as your sacred home, or your body as your own. Whether it's a growing relationship with your body, growing. We're all in the process of growing, healing, learning. And the inner ring. So how do you practice this self-love in daily life? Maybe what boundaries help you feel safe, respected, empowered? And just really listening. And this is just getting some information. It doesn't, and we're bringing in a compassionate lens. So when we go inside, when we're inner listening, what we're taking with is our compassionate heart, our loving eyes. And this might be an evolution in practice. Yeah, so if we notice that we have our critical lens on, or if we have our judging lens on, so we're just practicing. Okay, I'm going to remove these lenses, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to put on my lens of care, my lens of compassion. An outer ring. Are there ways that you celebrate yourself, or celebrate maybe your transformation or learning? Maybe something that has been. You face something difficult, even you face that adversity, or sometimes the process of learning can be challenging, or we have different experiences of things that are maybe like typical learning, like in school, or the learning in life that can be challenging, painful. And what learning have you taken in it and transformed into your own wisdom. And not that we need pain for wisdom, but we maybe sometimes we connect with our deep, deep wisdom to get through things. So in this beginning, this the intention of planting seeds. What seeds, intentions, hopes, desires would you like to plant in your mandala garden? And if you're open to maybe spending some time with this, or maybe writing about it, journaling. And if you're open to anything is possible, absolutely anything is possible. And feel free to take more time or return. And maybe this is a process. This is the process of planting, maybe intentions and beginning. We can always begin again. Tending your garden, growing, blooming, harvesting, composting, release and renewal. And now we create some closure. When we create open sacred time, it can be a beautiful practice into kind of like a circle, like just closing the circle with this practice. So you then come back to the elements, the earth element, your body, feel the wind, feel your breath. Water, notice any other emotions or movement. Does your body need to move, to move so you should really feel your body. The fire, the light, the warmth, the compassion, and space. Maybe there's even more space inside. And thank you for beginning together.
I love that, Gretchen. That was like a brief version of I feel like one of your signature practices. And I know we'll get more of that as we go along this journey together, which is going to just be so exciting to do and to experience. And as we wrap up this first episode, this beginning together, as we take that step, I think, just a reminder of the safety that will be here within this conversation, this ongoing conversation. And I think that invitation to that is what we really want to lay out for everyone.
Yeah, thank you, Dee. Yes. Yeah. So, and safety is our grounding, and sometimes, reclaiming safety. We're creating safety, and sometimes that. So maybe we can spend more time maybe in another conversation, because that is foundational, and important. And I really want our time together to be continuing to cultivate safety.
And I love how you always bring compassion and curiosity to the table, because that's what it really is. Compassion for ourselves, for each other, and curiosity to lean into all of that. So as we wrap up, any final thoughts from you, Gretchen?
I feel my heart just like expanding. That it feels joyful. And I would love to continue to create an openness in conversations, and there's a collective consciousness that's rising, shining the light for us all to see. There's a lot of swells and surges in our sea of humanity that are rocking our boats and creating instability. That's from a poem I wrote, but that's what's kind of coming up right now. And so acknowledging that there's a lot of instability and unease, and there is a collective consciousness that's rising. So what I'm hoping is to, be part of many, many networks for people of safety, of connection with themselves, of the real reality of your body, energy, and mind, and the continued trust and the roots of safety, and to navigate in the world we live in, and to create, and to transform the world we're living in together.
What a beautiful way to put that. And of course, we invite everyone to subscribe and follow on the platform that they're listening on, to share this episode with someone they know, to reach out, to take a deep dive in the show notes of this episode for learning anything further, for getting into a deeper reflection of things, and for, of course, reaching out and discussing anything with us. We're always welcome to those comments and questions and all of that. This has been great, Gretchen, really great.
Thank you, Dee, and thank you, everyone. It's I'm excited, for our journey, our adventure.
Absolutely, and we'll see you next time on the Sacred Garden Mandala.